Original post. Sister stole my identity to empty my inheritance, so I ruined her wedding day. I know the title sounds insane, but I'm currently sitting in a hotel room while my entire family absolutely blows up my phone, calling me a heartless monster, a sociopath, and a terrible sibling. I'm trembling while typing this, and my hands won't stop shaking. I just need to get this out there because I feel like I'm losing my mind. Reddit, I need to know, am I actually the asshole here? To understand any of this, you need a little bit of background on my family dynamic. I'm a 24-year-old female, and my sister, Sophia, is 26. For as long as I can remember, Sophia has been the golden child. She is beautiful, deeply materialistic, incredibly spoiled, and a master manipulator. She has always known exactly how to cry on command to get our parents to give her whatever she wants. If Sophia wanted a new car for her 16th birthday, my parents financed it even if it meant we couldn't go on family vacations. I, on the other hand, have always been the quiet, independent one. I stayed out of trouble, got good grades, worked through college, and never asked my parents for a single dime because I knew every spare cent they had went into funding Sophia's lifestyle. About a year ago, our wealthy grandfather passed away. It was a devastating loss for the family, but Papa looked out for us until the very end. In his will, he left a substantial inheritance for both Sophia and me, exactly $150,000 each. However, because he knew how irresponsible Sophia could be with money, he put strict conditions on the inheritance. The money was locked away in individual trust funds managed by a local bank. We weren't allowed to touch a single cent of it until we turned 25, unless it was released early for what the legal documents called major life milestones. For Sophia, her upcoming wedding qualified as a milestone, meaning she got early access to her $150,000. For me, since I'm only 24 and single, my money was supposed to sit securely in that vault for another year. I was completely fine with that because I planned to use every penny of it as a down payment on my first apartment and to kickstart my future. That brings us to last week. I've been browsing the housing market, getting ready to finally move out and start my independent adult life next year. Before applying for pre-approval on a small condo, I decided to do a routine check on my credit score. When the page loaded, my stomach instantly dropped. My score had absolutely plummeted into the gutter. There were multiple flags for massive credit inquiries and a sudden, bizarre shift in my financial profile. Panicking and thinking I was a victim of a random cyber attack, I immediately called the bank holding our grandfather's trust funds. I finally got through to a senior customer service representative, and after giving them my account details, the woman on the other end dropped a total bombshell. "Ma'am, your trust account is nearly empty," she said, sounding utterly confused. "There is only about $350 left in it." I felt the room spin. I told her that was impossible, that I was only 24, and that I hadn't authorized a single withdrawal. That's when the horror story unfolded. The representative pulled up the transaction history and the branch notes. Apparently, 3 weeks ago, I had walked into a physical branch of the bank in our hometown. Sophia and I look remarkably similar. We share the same hair color, eye color, facial structure, and general build. Because we grew up in the same household, Sophia knows absolutely every piece of my personal data. She knows my social security number, my date of birth, my mother's maiden name, and the name of my first childhood pet. According to the bank's records, Sophia had walked into that branch carrying a high-quality fake ID with my name and her photo. She pretended to be me. She put on a massive, tearful performance for the branch manager, signing forged documents and claiming that I desperately needed the funds transferred immediately for an emergency, life-saving medical procedure overseas that insurance wouldn't cover. Because she had all my security questions memorized and a matching ID, the bank fell for it hook, line, and sinker. They bypassed the age restriction under the emergency milestone clause and wired almost the entire $150,000 out of my account. I hung up the phone, completely numb, vomiting in my bathroom from pure stress. As soon as I washed my face, I drove straight to Sophia's apartment to confront her privately. I expected her to deny it, to cry, or to act defensive. Instead, when I showed her the bank statements, she didn't even blink. She literally laughed it off, waving her hand in the air like it was some minor sibling dispute. "Oh, stop being so dramatic," she scoffed. "I just borrowed it. My wedding budget was supposed to be $50,000, but it ballooned into a $200,000 luxury destination wedding. The venue, the flowers, the designer dress, everything is so expensive, and Mom and Dad couldn't afford to pay the difference. You aren't even using your money until next year anyway. I'll pay you back over time, I promise. She had stolen my entire future to fund a single day of vanity. Furious and shaking, I left her apartment and drove straight to my parents' house, expecting them to share my absolute outrage. I thought they would help me force her to cancel the wedding or sell her things to get my money back. Instead, the gaslighting reached a whole new level. My mother sat me down, took my hand, and looked at me with sad eyes. "Look, honey," she said. "What Sophia did was wrong, we know that. But she's your sister. It's her special day." She panicked because she didn't want to be embarrassed in front of her fiancé's incredibly wealthy family. "If you involve the police, you will ruin her wedding, she will go to jail, and our family name will be permanently destroyed in this town. Just let her have her wedding, and we will figure out a payment plan later." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. A payment plan? My parents are middle class. They could never afford to pay me back $150,000, and Sophia has never held a steady job in her life. They were asking me to sacrifice my life savings so Sophia could play princess for a day. Yesterday, I spoke with a legal expert and the bank manager. They made the reality of the situation crystal clear. The bank will not refund my money or accept liability unless I file a formal police report for grand theft and identity fraud. Filing that report means the police will show up at Sophia's door, and because of the massive amount of money stolen, she will be facing severe felony charges right before she walks down the aisle. When I told my parents this, they completely turned on me. They told me that if I call the cops and ruin Sophia's life, they will completely disown me, cut me off from the family forever, and ensure that every relative knows I am a vengeful, selfish monster. So here I am. The wedding is in exactly 3 days. The family is texting me nonstop, demanding that I sign a retroactive loan agreement to cover Sophia's tracks so the bank drops its internal fraud investigation. They think they've backed me into a corner. They think I'm going to stay quiet just to keep the peace. But I'm not calling the cops yet. I have a much better idea. The wedding is this weekend, and I'm still invited. I'll see you all in the update. Update. I am back in my hotel room. My phone has been vibrating so aggressively against the nightstand that it actually slid onto the floor, and I'm just going to leave it there. I have over 100 missed calls and hundreds of text messages calling me every vile name under the sun. My mother sent a text saying I have completely destroyed our family, and Sophia's bridesmaids are tracking my social media. But I have never felt more at peace. To give you an update on how the last 48 hours went down, I have to explain how I handled my family. After reading through your comments on my last post, many of you told me to go straight to the police. Trust me, I wanted to. But I knew that if Sophia got arrested in her apartment a couple of days before the wedding, my parents would find a way to sweep it under the rug with the groom's family. They would make up some lie about a sudden legal misunderstanding, protect Sophia's reputation, and I would spend the rest of my life fighting an uphill battle against a unified front of gaslighting. No, I wanted everyone to see exactly who she was. So, I decided to play the part of the submissive, broken sibling. 2 days ago, I typed out a text message to Sophia. I forced myself to swallow the vomit rising in my throat as I wrote it. I said, "fine. I talked to Mom and Dad, and I won't call the police. I don't want to ruin Mom and Dad's life, and I don't want to be the reason you go to jail. I won't sign that retroactive loan agreement yet because I want my lawyer to look at it, but I promise I won't involve the cops before the wedding. I'll see you there." Sophia's response came back within 30 seconds. It was a flurry of heart emojis and exclamation points. "Oh my God, thank you, sweetie. I knew you'd do the right thing for family. I promise I'll start paying you back as soon as the honeymoon is over. Love you so much. Can't wait to see you in your dress." She didn't feel an ounce of guilt. She was ecstatic because she truly believed she had just committed the perfect crime, stolen $150,000 from her own blood, and gotten away with it completely scot-free. But while Sophia was getting her spray tan and sipping pre-wedding mimosas, I spent the next 48 hours working like a maniac. I went into overdrive gathering every single piece of bulletproof evidence I could get my hands on. I visited the bank branch manager again, who was incredibly cooperative once they realized the sheer scale of the fraud. They provided me with high-resolution digital copies of the bank statements showing the exact moment my trust fund was drained. More importantly, they gave me copies of the paperwork Sophia had signed while pretending to be me, complete with her forged, messy attempt at my signature. Next, I compiled the evidence from my phone. I exported the text messages where Sophia casually admitted she borrowed my inheritance because her budget ballooned from $50,000 to $200,000. I downloaded the audio files of the voicemails my parents had left me. In one of them, my mother's voice was crystal clear, saying, asterisk, just let her have her special day, and we will figure out a payment plan later. Don't ruin her wedding by involving the police. Asterisk. I took all of this digital evidence and gave it to my best friend, Mark. Mark is a professional video editor and an absolute genius. I told him exactly what I wanted to do. He looked at the evidence, looked at me, and said, "This is scorched earth. Are you sure?" I told him I had never been surer of anything in my entire life. We spent the night compiling a master file, and Mark saved it onto a sleek, silver flash drive. That brings us to this morning, the wedding day. The venue was an absolute masterpiece of sickening luxury. It was held at a historic, sprawling estate that cost more to rent for an afternoon than I make in a year. As I walked in, every single detail made my blood boil because I knew exactly whose money had paid for it. I looked at the 10-tier wedding cake decorated with cascading, edible gold leaf. Asterisk paid for by my future apartment. Asterisk I walked past the custom, designer ice sculptures carved into the shape of swans melting in the afternoon sun. Asterisk paid for by my financial stability. Asterisk I watched the guests flock to the premium open bar, serving top-shelf vintage champagne. Asterisk paid for by my grandfather's dying wishes. Asterisk Sophia had literally stripped my life bare so she could play princess for 12 hours. During the ceremony, I sat quietly in the third row. I wore a nice dress, kept a calm expression on my face, and didn't say a word. When Sophia walked down the aisle, she looked stunning, I'll admit that. But as she stood at the altar, she caught my eye. Right in the middle of the priest speaking about sanctity and devotion, Sophia flashed me a smug, triumphant little smile. It was a look that said, I won, and there is absolutely nothing you can do about it. I just smiled back. After the ceremony, the guests moved into the grand ballroom for the reception. There were about 200 people there, including the groom's family. The groom, James, comes from an incredibly traditional, highly respected, and deeply wealthy family. They are the kind of old money people who value reputation and integrity above everything else. This is where the trap was sprung. Mark had arrived at the venue early, pretending to be my plus one. He is incredibly charming and managed to strike up a conversation with the coordinator running the audiovisual booth. Mark told the coordinator that he was a family friend and that our parents had a surprise, updated version of the couple's love story video slideshow that they wanted to play right before the toasts. Because the venue staff was busy managing 200 guests, they didn't think twice. They took the silver flash drive from Mark and loaded it into the main projector system, which was connected to 3 massive screens around the ballroom. A few minutes later, the coordinator announced over the microphone that it was time for the family speeches. My dad went first, giving a tearful, generic speech about how proud he was of his beautiful daughter. Everyone clapped. Then I stood up. I walked over to the front of the room and took the microphone. The room went quiet, and I could see my mother smiling at me from the head table, looking relieved that I was playing along. Sophia was leaning back in her chair, sipping champagne, looking completely relaxed. Hi everyone. I began, my voice clear and steady through the speakers. For those who don't know me, I'm Sophia's younger sibling. I wanted to stand up here today and talk about what this wedding truly means. A wedding is supposed to be about the union of 2 people, about trust, and about the deep bonds of family. It's about what we are willing to sacrifice for the people we love. I paused, looking directly at Sophia. Her smile began to falter just a little bit. This is an incredibly beautiful, luxury wedding, I continued. And I think it's important that everyone in this room understands the true cost of this beautiful day and the lengths to which my sister went to ensure it happened. So, before I finish my toast, I have a small presentation to show you all about how this day came to life. Mark, please press play. I turned around and faced the projector screen. The lights in the ballroom dimmed automatically. But instead of childhood photos of Sophia and James riding bicycles or smiling on vacations, The main screen lit up with a massive, high-resolution PDF document. It was a copy of my grandfather's trust fund statement. At the very top, in bold letters, was my name. Below it, a line item showing a withdrawal of $149,650. A collective murmur rippled through the crowd of 200 people. They were confused. Before anyone could speak, the slide changed. The screen showed a side-by-side comparison of my actual signature next to the forged document Sophia had signed at the bank branch. Above the images, a massive text caption read, "Identity theft and bank fraud." "What is this? Turn it off," my dad yelled, starting to stand up from his seat. But the AV booth was all the way across the room, and Mark had stepped in front of the door. The slide changed again. This time, it was a giant screenshot of Sophia's text messages to me. The text was so large that every single person in the back rows could read it clearly. Asterisk. "Oh, stop being so dramatic. I just borrowed it. My wedding budget ballooned into a $200,000 luxury destination wedding. You aren't even using your money until next year anyway." Asterisk. The ballroom went deathly, terrifyingly silent. You could have dropped a pin and heard it echo. And then, the audio kicked in. Mark had amplified the sound files through the venue's premium surround sound speakers. My mother's frantic, gaslighting voice boomed through the ballroom, echoing off the high ceilings. Asterisk. What Sophia did was wrong, we know that. But she's your sister. It's her special day. She panicked because she didn't want to be embarrassed in front of her fiancé's incredibly wealthy family. If you involve the police, you will ruin her wedding. She will go to jail. Just let her have her wedding. Asterisk. The audio played on a continuous, brutal loop. I turned back to look at the head table. Sophia's face had gone completely, violently white. Her jaw was hanging open, and she looked like she was looking at a ghost. My mother had her hands over her face, crying hysterically, while my dad was red-faced, screaming at the staff to shut the power down. But the most striking reaction was from the groom and his family. James's parents, who were sitting at the front table, looked absolutely horrified. His mother looked like she was about to faint from the pure scandal of it, and his father was staring at Sophia with a look of absolute disgust. James himself had turned completely pale. He slowly turned his head to look at his new bride, staring at her in utter shock and realization. He had no idea. He genuinely thought her family was paying for their share of the wedding legally. He was looking at a stranger. The venue staff finally managed to cut the power to the projectors, and the room plunged into an awkward, tense twilight. The silence lasted for 3 seconds before the entire ballroom erupted into absolute chaos. People were whispering loudly, chairs were scraping against the floor, and my dad started marching toward me with his fists clenched. I didn't give him the chance to reach me. I looked down at the microphone in my hand, smiled smoothly, and dropped it onto the floor. The heavy thud echoed through the speakers right before they died. I reached over to the side table, grabbed my coat, and turned my back on my family. Mark met me at the exit doors. We walked out of the opulent, expensive grand ballroom, leaving the screaming, the crying, and the ruined wedding behind us. We stepped out into the cool evening air, where a black Uber was already waiting for us at the curb. As I pulled the door shut and the car drove away from the estate, I looked out the back window. I could see my dad running out of the front entrance, frantically looking around for me. But it was already too late. I was gone. I'm currently eating a cheap burger in my hotel room. My phone is still screaming on the floor, but I haven't picked it up. Tomorrow morning, the bank opens at 9 a.m., and the local police precinct is right down the street. The wedding is over. Now, the real fun begins. I'll update you all when the legal fallout settles. Final update. It has been a few weeks since my last post, and I'm finally in a safe, quiet place where I can give you all the conclusion to this absolute nightmare. I know a lot of you have been waiting to hear what happened after I dropped the mic and walked out of that ballroom. And honestly, the fallout was more explosive than I ever could have anticipated. First, let's talk about the groom, James. The wedding ended the exact second I left the venue. There was no dancing, no cake cutting, and absolutely no celebration. Apparently, as soon as the projector screens went dark, James walked away from the head table, refused to look at Sophia, and locked himself in a back room with his parents. Sophia was outside the door screaming and crying, claiming it was all a photoshopped lie born out of sibling jealousy. But James isn't stupid. The text messages and my mother's very distinct voice booming over the speakers were undeniable. The best part? Because of the chaos, they never actually got around to signing the official marriage license. James packed his bags that very night, moved all of his things out of their shared apartment, and cut off all communication with her. He was completely disgusted to realize he was about to marry a literal identity thief who would ruthlessly ruin her own sibling for a lavish party. Since the papers were never signed, the wedding was never legally finalized. There is no marriage to annul. As far as the law is concerned, it never happened. This triggered an absolute, nuclear meltdown within my family. When I finally picked up my phone the next day, the avalanche of texts and voicemails was staggering. My parents are now facing total financial ruin. Because James's wealthy family immediately pulled all of their financial support and left the venue, my parents were left holding the bag for the remaining vendor bills, catering costs, and luxury extensions. They are legally liable for tens of thousands of dollars they simply do not have. Sophia spent the entire weekend hysterical, watching her dream life, her rich fiancé, and her social standing vanish into thin air before her honeymoon was even supposed to start. But I wasn't done. The morning after the wedding, at exactly 9 a.m., I walked into the local police precinct. I didn't just bring a statement. I handed the detectives a meticulously organized binder containing every single piece of evidence Mark and I had compiled. I gave them the bank transaction logs, the high-resolution copies of the fake ID, the forged signatures from the bank manager, and the explicit text admissions. Because the stolen amount totaled $149,650, the detectives told me this wasn't just a petty family dispute. It was a massive, high-level felony case of grand theft and identity fraud. The police moved incredibly fast. 2 days later, they showed up at Sophia's apartment with an arrest warrant. A friend of a bridesmaid actually texted me the details, and I have to admit, it was incredibly satisfying. Sophia was still wearing her customized, white silk bride robe when the officers handcuffed her and led her out to the squad car in front of her entire apartment complex. She spent the night in a holding cell, completely stripped of her luxury aesthetic. As for my grandfather's inheritance, the wheels of justice are turning in my favor. Because a formal police report was filed and the criminal investigation is officially underway, the bank's fraud department had the legal authority to step in. They have frozen Sophia's personal assets and are currently working through the legal protocols to restore my trust fund. The bank manager assured me that because the fraud was so clear-cut, I am guaranteed to get every single cent back. It will take a few months for the paperwork to clear and for the funds to be redeposited into my account, but my future is officially secure again. In the midst of all this, I made the easiest decision of my life. I completely cut the cord. I have officially blocked Sophia, my mother, and my father on every single platform. I also blocked the wave of extended family members who tried to flying monkey me into feeling guilty for destroying my sister's life. I realized that a real family doesn't ask you to sacrifice your entire life savings to cover up a felony. With Mark's help, I quietly packed up my things, signed a lease, and moved to a brand new apartment in a different city a few hours away. Nobody in my family has my new address, and they never will. I am starting completely fresh, surrounded by people who actually care about my well-being. I want to take a moment to address the Reddit community before I close this chapter. During my last post, some of you left comments saying I went too far by publicizing the fraud at the reception. You said I should have just gone to the cops quietly. But you have to understand, Sophia didn't just steal money from a bank account. She tried to steal my entire future, my stability, and my peace of mind, all while expecting me to sit in the audience and smile as she celebrated her stolen luxury. She wanted the spotlight, so I just turned it up a little bit. I didn't ruin her wedding day. Her own greed and criminal choices did. I just handed her the bill. Thank you to everyone who validated my anger, gave me legal advice, and kept me grounded when my own parents were trying to convince me that I was the villain. For the first time in my life, I don't feel like the hidden, quiet sibling. I feel completely independent, completely validated, and finally free.